I am, thank you. Thank you very much for remembering that. I'm the Vice President of the League of Women Voters of Tallahassee, and I want to welcome each of you to what we believe will be an exciting and informative presentation on the use of taxpayer funds for private and charter school education. If you're not already a member of the League, I highly encourage you to consider joining us. And men are, in fact, active participants of our organization, and so we welcome you. Before I introduce our speaker for the evening, I want to encourage you to also join us on October the 21st at 6 p.m. for an evening with nationally recognized civil rights leader, Attorney Benjamin Crump. We're going to have a discussion on civil rights and voter suppression. Now, on to our topic for this evening. Our speaker is Dr. Sally Boutsen. As many of you know, she is a long-standing advocate for public education. She's president of the League of Women Voters of Tallahassee and also serves on the Education Task Force for the State League. She earned her master's and doctor's degree from Florida State University, and her background in education includes teaching at 3 elementary schools, working at Florida State University as an adjunct professor and research associate. She's led a nonprofit or leading a nonprofit organization called the Institute for School Innovation. This is she's written several books in the field of education. She's also developed the project Child Instruction System, which is an innovative teaching model that's been used in elementary schools across the country. This evening, Dr. Bazin will share with us the findings from a preliminary investigative report on StepUp for Students. For those of you who don't know, that is a scholarship funding organization that enables students to attend private school using taxpayer funding. Our speaker is well versed in how public school funding is being diverted to charter and private schools. There will be time for questions and comments after the presentation. So I ask that you please hold all questions until then. And as always, you can place any questions or comments that you may have in the chat box, and we'll address those at the end of the presentation. I ask that you enjoy. Sally?
Well, thank you and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm going to share my screen so you can see the slides. And there we go. This is a real pleasure to speak to my home group. I had the opportunity to speak to the state Lunch and Learn last week, and it was very interesting, got a lot of good feedback. But tonight I want to share with you what we're calling a preliminary investigative report. We hope that somebody, an investigative reporter or somebody with a lot more clout and resources than we had, will look into this even further. So what our goal was to start a conversation about what is happening with private school vouchers that few people are even aware of. And it's quite interesting what we discovered. A group of us here in Tallahassee did the research, and Linda, Bev, Joan, and Pat are my local committee that worked with us. And then Sue Legg, I really appreciated, she joined us. She's quite knowledgeable in education policy, and she was very helpful in contributing to our research. So we were a group of volunteers interested in education, interested in government and what's happening in our legislature. So we did this report last spring during the legislative session with the hope that it would have some influence on how the legislature was looking at expanding the voucher program. Clearly we had no effect, but we tried. And like I say, we hope somebody will pick this up and run with it, because there's a lot more to be learned. So let's just have an overview of the Florida voucher program. Now remember, what we're talking about here are vouchers for private schools. And don't get it mixed up with charter schools. Charter schools is a whole nother issue. So what I'm going to be talking about tonight is related to private education through a voucher program funded by the state of Florida, as you'll find out. So there were 5 programs last year in 2020. And the first one, that's the longest one, is called the Family Empowerment Scholarship, which is designed for students attending a low performing school. Now you notice that I put scholarship in quotes. This is a very clever scheme that they've come up with to hide the fact that this is a voucher program, but by calling them scholarships, it gives it a certain cachet and a sense of, exemplary. Oh, my child's getting a scholarship. This is really a big deal. The Gardner Scholarship has been around for a while. That's designed for students with special needs. Now, the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship was a more recent one, and this was how to enable low-income students to attend a private school. And then last scholarship that came along is the Hope Scholarship, which is the one for students who have been bullied. And this is the one that they expanded recently to include students who don't want to wear a mask at school, that they can claim that they have been bullied to wear a mask and they can get a voucher for a private school. And then there are also reading scholarships, excuse me, for students with low reading scores. So there's a lot of ways that you can qualify to get one of these vouchers that's worth about up to $10,000. So what they did this year, excuse me, was to make it even more onerous, and I'm going to talk about that tonight. So effective this school year, the voucher program has combined those 5 programs into 2. The Family Empowerment Scholarship Program, which they call FES. And this is the one that's really troubling for anybody that cares about the Constitution and the separation of church and state, because for the first time, they are now directly using general revenue funds, the FEFP, which is the fund that funds our public schools, to put that into what they're calling educational savings accounts, ESAs, which is kind of like getting a debit card that you can use for a whole variety of expenses. And we'll talk about that some more. And then the granddaddy of them all is the tax credit scholarship. And this is the one that is funded through tax credits, or what they call donations. Again, I put that in quotes, but we'll talk about this a lot because this is the one that's really shocking. Tax credit scholarships go for tuition for private schools, and transportation is another way you can use the scholarship money. And if I call them scholarships, remember, I'm really talking about vouchers. This year also, this is amazing, they raised the income eligibility. So it used to be for high poverty students. Now it's raised to up to $100,000 for a family of 4. And every year, this is built into the legislation, it increases annually. So in a few years, you can be quite middle class, upper class family and qualify for a voucher to a private school. Now, this is one that's really amazing, or shocking, I guess is the word. Once in, always in. So what this means is if you have a kindergarten student and your family qualifies by having up to $100,000 income, you get a scholarship or a voucher for that kindergarten student. And that voucher stays with the child all the way through high school. So it increases annually, and once you're in, you're always in. So that's a new wrinkle in the new voucher law. They used to have it where this was supposed to be for helping students who were in a failing public school to move to a private school. But now they've even taken that away. So you could be homeschooled, you could be in another private school and you want to move, you can still get a voucher. And then they've also made it even easier to qualify to get a voucher. So they've added a whole lot of different categories, including if you're a dependent of an armed service member, you are eligible no matter what. Now, here's another thing. Like, go back to that kindergarten student that's going to have this voucher all the way through 12th grade. if they don't use all of that every year, they can roll it over into a college savings account. So by the time you're in out of high school, you can have a nice little nest egg for college at taxpayer expense. Now, the SFO, which is what we're going to talk about, which stands for Scholarship Funding Organization, they used to have to be audited every year, but they complained to their friends in the legislature and said, oh, that's just so onerous, please. And so they have graciously changed it. So now they only have to be audited every 3 years. And they also raised the fee that these scholarship funding organizations get. They get 2.5% of every voucher they give out. So they're making a nice little chunk of change. And the really bad thing is these donors, as they call them, the ones that are getting these tax credits, are now confidential. So it used to be, and you'll see in our report where we did discover who is funding these things, which industries, but now we will never know because the legislature conveniently made it confidential. So let's talk about these scholarship funding organization. The one we looked into is called StepUp for Students. And when I asked my friends and even my education colleagues and friends, have you ever heard of StepUp for Students? No, never heard of it. Well, it's huge and you're going to hear about it tonight. And I hope other people hear about it as well. So they have 99% of the business in Florida. There's a little other group called AAA Scholarship Foundation that has a few, but the big chunk of it is administered by StepUp. They take this administrative fee, and on some of them, they can even get 3%. So we figured there were 874 million given out in 2020 alone. So that left 21 million for StepUp to use for whatever. Well, here's one thing they use for. This is their headquarters. Sue Legg famously said when I showed them this picture, our group this picture, she says, well, you just need to put up that picture and that says it all right there. But as I said, this is a huge operation. I had a chance to go to Jacksonville and visit a friend, and I looked up where StepUp was located, went there and took a picture of their headquarters just so I could see it for myself. Now let's talk about them. It was founded just 20 years ago by John Kirtley. John Kirtley is a hedge fund billionaire who lives in Tampa, who's also, you might be surprised to know, affiliated and friendly with Jeb Bush. And of course, this whole voucher parent choice scheme began under Jeb Bush 20 years ago. So John Kirtley, this very, very rich man, had a scholarship funding organization that he had funded privately. So they got together and decided they would move that into this new group called StepUp for Students. I was shocked to see this. In 2020, Forbes rated StepUp for Students as the 21st largest charity in the United States. Now, just to put that in perspective, we're talking about American Cancer Society, United Way. These are some of the top charities above StepUp for Students, but 21st, pretty darn nice. According to their financial statements, the last ones we could find, you can see their total assets of almost $700 million. You saw their headquarters in Jacksonville. They have another affiliate office in Clearwater. They have 265 employees, $18 million payroll. Their president, whose name is Doug Tuthill, has a nice salary for a nonprofit charity director. They have 11 key employees with 6-figure salaries. And they have an 8-member board with corporate and political affiliations. Several of them are former legislators. And it was shocking to me to learn that Congressman Al Lawson is one of their board members. So he's our North Florida congressman. Some of you may have him as your congressman. You might want to ask him, why do you serve on their board? What are you doing that for? So as we see, this is a very well-established, in 20 years has raised and has a great amount of money and power. One of the clever things that these parent choice people have done is to change the language, the terminology. So as I said, what we would call a voucher, they have now termed it a scholarship. What they call a donation is actually a dollar for dollar tax credit. So these corporations and these other businesses that are getting tax credits, they are not making donations out of their general revenue or out of their profits. They are just simply diverting the taxes that they owe to the state and moving it over to StepUp for Students. And then calling it a charity is really a stretch, because in our opinion, what we learned is this is basically a money management marketing firm, and far from what most people would think of a charity. So where do they get their money? Corporate income taxes are diverted. Excise taxes on liquor, wine, and malt beverages. And we learned that one of the biggest funders of these vouchers is the liquor industry. Gas and oil production taxes, they can divert that. Insurance premiums tax. And finally, this one is one directly consumers are funding, that when you purchase an automobile, you are signing away a portion of the sales tax. If you sign the paperwork that they put in front of you, you are allowing them to use some of the sales tax that would have gone to the state revenue to again divert that to StepUp for Students. And they use this one for the so-called bully scholarship. So, you know, people that are signing the paper, it's like, oh yeah, I want to help kids who are bullied. But don't be fooled by that. Be sure to look at all of the fine print when you sign the papers to purchase a car. So $3 billion, that's a lot of money that could have gone into our state revenue to fund our government and fund our public education system, has been diverted to StepUp for Students. The major contributors, as we said, here they are. You can see they have diverted a lot of their taxes, the biggest one being the alcohol distribution industry. It's really, you know, I won't read them here. You can see for yourself, but it's kind of a shocking amount of money. Some of the notable names that we discovered, you see them here: Geico, Humana, Skechers. You know, oh no, I like Skechers. But we also, the last year that we could find who and how many donors was 2019. And as I said, this year's legislation, they have made it so that we'll never know, that the donors are now confidential. And I think what happened was when some of the word got out that some of these schools that were getting voucher students were discriminating, especially discriminating against gay, lesbian, LGBTQ students, it gave the companies a bad name, so they started backing off. So now, though, they don't have to worry because it's all going to be confidential. Now, let me get my cursor here. So this is their clever little ads. And like I say, a big part of what they're using our money for, and I call it our money because it's money that should have gone into the government revenue. They spend a great deal of money marketing, lobbying, and selling. Here's one of the ads. They have a lot of ads on social media. They do webinars. They have consultants that will help people apply for these so-called scholarships. They really have a huge lobbying presence in Tallahassee. And that's what really got me interested, because I'm on Lobby Corps. And for the past few years, I would go up to the Capitol and testify or be there for the education meetings. And there would be all these mobs of little children or high school students, all in these t-shirts. And they would come and give tearful testimony about how they've been so happy now they're finally in a private school and they're getting all A's for the first time in their life and blah, blah, blah. And the legislators sit up there smiling and patting themselves on the back that they're doing such a good job for these poor, unfortunate children. And I'm always thinking, how do all these so-called high poverty kids get up here to Tallahassee for these rallies and t-shirts and busloads of them? And of course, how they do it is StepUp is funding it. They're bringing all these people up here to give testimony and meet with legislators. They, of course, give campaign contributions through PACs that they've established. And here's one, the new thing that they're doing is on their website, they have an amazing website. And I attended one of their webinars, which are very sophisticated. But they now have what they call a shopping place where you can have a link on their website. So if you need supplies, if you're a homeschool parent and homeschool qualifies for these vouchers, you can go to their website, click a link, and it will direct you to all these vendors who are selling educational supplies and computers and curriculum workbooks and things like that. So they're really proud and they brag about how they're creating this whole cottage industry of entrepreneurs who can provide educational materials. And then finally, the corporate marketing, what's going on there is they also go out and sell this idea to the corporations and convince them how much they will be helping these children if they send their money to StepUp for Students to provide vouchers or scholarships rather than paying their taxes. And we also suspect, and this needs to be verified, but what's in it for the corporation is that because this is a so-called charity, they can also get an income tax credit on their federal taxes, should they pay any, because they're contributing to a charity. So it's a double win for them. Here's what I think all of us should be alarmed about. And that is this big, huge private organization is operating with very little oversight or supervision. When I would go up to the legislature and when some of the usually Democrats would question, well, how do you know that, this is being administered effectively and that people aren't taking advantage and there's no fraud? And Senator Diaz, Manny Diaz, who's the architect of this whole thing right now, he would always say, oh, we have guardrails built in. There are guardrails, this is not a problem. Well, if there are guardrails, we think they're made of toothpicks because we could not see a lot of oversight. The Department of Education completely has washed their hands. They say these are private schools. We have nothing to do with it. The scholarship funding organization has all the control. So we could find there were 1,800 private schools that are getting students who are getting these vouchers. And 66% of them are religious schools. Since the beginning of this whole program, 1 million and more scholarships have been awarded. So there's a lot of kids. It's still, a small percentage of all the children, but each year it gets bigger and bigger. And there's certainly, that's their goal, is to make it big and big and big. Who is monitoring for income eligibility? That's what StepUp is supposed to be doing. But we didn't see that was happening all the time when you look at their audits. So people that maybe, are exceeding the income level are getting vouchers even though they don't qualify. Now, here's a really troubling thing is these ESAs, and that again stands for Educational Savings Account. So the new legislation for the scholarships that are being funded directly from our general revenue, this is a new thing, they are going into an account that each family gets. And then they are free to spend this on anything on a so-called approved list. So they can spend it on tutoring, on computers, on whatever. But we've heard stories about some parents, using it to go to Disney on a field trip, so it's somebody needs to be monitoring this, because there's a lot of opportunity for fraud and misspending on these goods and services. Now, the private schools, of course, do not have to do the state testing like all the other schools do. And there is a requirement in the legislation that the private schools of a certain size, the larger ones, are required to give a nationally normed test and submit their results to StepUp. But again, we found that that wasn't always being done, and there doesn't seem to be any oversight if it's not being done. And also, what about enrollment requirements as far as discrimination and students with special needs and so on? Very questionable whether all that is happening as it should be. All right. So the answer that we always get when we ask, or when anybody questions us, when we would speak at these testimonies at the legislature, when these new laws were being crafted, we would ask, what about teacher qualifications? The teachers don't have to be certified as far as we know. They can be anybody. And the answer is, it's up to the parents. It's their, parents will watch. They know, it's up to them. If they don't like the quality of the teachers, they don't have to go there. What about the curriculum content? That's really something we should all be concerned about. What are they teaching these kids? For all we know, it's some kind of, could be a Taliban school. We don't know what their curriculum is. And we've heard horror stories about some of these schools and homeschools that have very questionable curriculum in science. What are they learning about science? It's very questionable. Are they learning anything? What are their learning outcomes? Do these kids learn up to the standards that need to be learned? And we have heard stories too, anecdotal stories about students who leave some of these voucher schools and go back to their district school, and they're way behind and they're having a lot of trouble. What are their discipline policies? How are they treating these kids? Are they back to corporal punishment, lock them in closets? We don't know. There's nobody monitoring except StepUp for Students. Do they discriminate against racial discrimination, or, on sexual preference and so on? What about safety and security? We had stories of people that have visited some of these schools that are a lot of them are like little church basement kind of schools. These are not your McClay schools and your high-end private schools. They are not taking students with vouchers. The vouchers are going to some very low level, just schools that are springing up, again, this cottage industry of parents, and somebody can start a homeschool in their basement and they qualify. There's nobody checking, is it safe and secure? And of course, there's a lot of concern about students with special needs at these private schools who aren't getting the services they need and deserve. Now, we had our team looked into some of the audits and financial reports. And this is where, as I said before, ours is a preliminary investigation. And somebody that can do, records requests and so on, which we don't have the capability to do, could really find out a lot more about what's going on financially. And I think that's where the public might really get concerned, and should be. As I said, it's now kept confidential. So what are the source of these so-called donations? in the last years and going forward. We found there were attendance records, and it was questionable that there were remote employees that were making lots of money. And you wonder, again, who are these people and what are they doing? That didn't show up in the audit reports. Are they being careful about sensitive student personal information? That we really don't know either. And as I said, there is the one good thing about the law as far as oversight is that the schools that are getting large amounts of these funds are supposed to give, have financial audits and give norm reference tests. But we found many examples of these schools that had not done the financial audit. And it was, we wondered, what are the sanctions? You know, what if they didn't do it? Do they just don't have to do it, or what happens? We don't know. The other thing that was interesting, somebody needs to follow up on, is they aren't earning a lot of interest on this money. And as a nonprofit, you are not allowed to use interest earned on donations, which they call these, on your operation. You have to use it for your program expenses. But were we able to find out? We don't know. So they should have been using that interest to give additional vouchers, but it's unclear whether that was actually happening or if they're illegally using this interest money. And again, what are the remedies if there are schools that aren't in compliance and parents who are ripping off the system using these educational savings accounts inappropriately? Because that's a lot of, you know, $1 million scholarship, that's a lot of monitoring and oversight that needs to be happening. And who knows whether it is. Well, like with anything, excuse me while I take a drink here. As with anything, follow the money. As I mentioned, the founder of this whole operation, in cahoots with Jeb Bush, he has a PAC, Political Action Committee, that gives a lot of money in campaign donations, 1.4 million in just the last election cycle. The board members, we also found that there's another subsidiary that StepUp has that operates in Alabama. And somebody asked me at the last event whether the board members are paid or not. And I don't know the answer to that. So that may be another thing that we need to have somebody look into. Now, Senator Manny Diaz, now don't confuse him with Miami's football coach, but Senator he is a big player in all this. And in fact, he himself has conflicts, in our opinion, in that he's employed by a private for-profit voucher school, charter school company. So he's pushing all this while he works for one of these outfits. And he also has his own little PAC where he can give money to fellow legislators to make sure they're on the same page. And in fact, this is an old quote, and when StepUp has responded to this report, and their only response has been, well, that was old. But they haven't been able to refute anything that we've said. But this quote shows you, that this is their whole operation, is they are very political. They're up here lobbying, they're giving money to candidates, and obviously it's working very well. And they're also helping all these people that want to start businesses to be able to sell their products and make money on the side. And it would be interesting, excuse me, to see what the relationship to some of these vendors to StepUp employees or StepUp board members. Again, there's a lot of room for further investigation to see the shenanigans that's going on here. Okay, what's going on? So really, to wrap this up, and then we'll take some questions and comments, is that what we're really creating in Florida, and Florida started it, but it's also happening, of course, in other states, such as Arizona is one of the worst as far as this private system. But we're really now having a parallel system, both using public funds. One is regulated, and of course, we know that our district schools are highly regulated. You know, they have all these requirements, and it's just very onerous what the overregulation for them. But then this whole other separate private system with little regulation or none at all. What we're also seeing is a resegregation of our schools. And, you know, we did a program here at Hot Topics for Leon County 2 years ago where we showed, or we had a program about Leon County now being the most segregated school district in Florida. And a lot of it is happening because of this parent choice, school choice, where people are moving to be with their own people. And children with special needs are really being left behind. And that's very troubling. So they really set up a brilliant scheme with this scholarship funding organization as a charity to skirt the constitutional requirement of separation of church and state. Because in 2017, the Florida Education Association did bring a lawsuit claiming this was unconstitutional, but the Florida Supreme Court threw it out because they said they didn't have taxpayer standing. So technically, this was not funded by taxpayers. It was funded by these so-called donations, although it was really just a clever way to divert these taxes. But what remains to be seen is this new law that goes into effect this school year. This one is the one where they are now taking money from general revenue. So it's going to be interesting to see if there are going to be any lawsuits. But I think it's one of the things that is making people reluctant to do a lawsuit is that the Supreme Court now is pretty stacked in favor of the school choice privatization philosophy. So it may be a moot question to try to get it to the Supreme Court, but hopefully somebody will take it on. Well, what is going to happen? What is the end game? Who knows who this is? This is a famous educator. He's often called the father of public education or public schools. Those of you smart people probably know who he is. This is Horace Mann. And Horace Mann, in the 1830s, when America was starting to become more industrialized, it became clear to people like him who were thinkers and changers was that the system that we had of a hodgepodge of private schools and church schools and parochial schools was not going to be useful in a country that was coming of age and growing and needed a more rigorous approach to learning. So Horace Mann, here are his 6 principles for public schools. And I want you to compare this with what we are moving toward with this new parent choice voucher education system, which is what Horace Mann was cautioning us about getting away from. His first principle was the public should no longer remain ignorant. Wouldn't that be nice? When you look at what's happening now with our divided country and people, I mean, you just have to say it's got to be ignorance with the way people disdain science and logic. And you have to think Horace was trying to warn us, we can no longer remain ignorant. Such public education should be paid for, controlled, and sustained by an interested public. And again, they were trying to get away from the days of, when the Catholic Church ran most of the schools, or parents that had the means and the money could have a private school. But it was really important now for a more egalitarian system where the public would control it. And Horace Mann realized how we needed to embrace children from a variety of backgrounds. And we know how important it is for the future of democracy for children to grow up knowing about other cultures and other children, being exposed to people that are different than them. And like I said, are we going that way, or are we going backwards? The education must be non-sectarian. And again, you remember the slide I showed you that with these vouchers, 62% are religious schools. And many of them are very conservative Christian schools or Catholic schools. And there's, again, it's a move to become more religious oriented. And this is an important one of Horace's tenets about being, using the tenets of a free society. And again, the curriculum has to be something that is agreed upon and research-based. And this one I really like. He said education should be provided by well-trained professional teachers. And that, of course, is back then is when the normal school started getting going, where they train teachers to know about curriculum, to know about pedagogy. And this is what we need to have a excellent public education system. And I would argue that we are moving away from these principles through this two-tiered education system. And it's very sobering and something we should all be aware of. And I think we should all be concerned about. And when asked, one of the legislators, he said, well, what is your goal? What do you, where are we headed with this? And he said, my hope is that we will eventually have every family get a voucher or a scholarship, and that we go to a completely parent-driven system. So there you are. That's where we're headed. If you're not happy about it, I'm not happy about it, the league is not happy about it, we need to speak up and let people know what's going on, because it's being pulled right from under us. Our public education system is in trouble, folks. So that's our report. It is available on the State League website if you want to read the report. If you contact me, of course, I'd be happy to send it to you. But let me just say that I will be glad to take questions and comments now. I hope you're still there. Everybody's with me. And so Felicia, why don't you check the chat or see if there's anything that I need to know about, or if anybody wants to raise their hand and make a comment, please do. And I apologize for my voice is kind of cracking up on me. So
There are currently no questions, Sally, in the chat box, but Joel Dawson has, and I am going to ask you unmute. Joel?
So Sally, that was an excellently produced report.
thank you.
And it was chilling that, it's really, really upsetting. I had one question that I missed about how much in 2020, you said that there were how many millions for StepUp?
Yeah, that was just that 1 year. We calculated $21 million went to StepUp. So based on the percent that they got, the 2.5 or 3% of each scholarship. Again, vouchers. They've got me calling them scholarships. Sorry about that. But yeah, that 1 year alone, and you saw the slide that shows their assets are now at $700 million. It's a huge operation, and their staff are making very nice salaries, and So they're doing very, very well. Sue Legg, you want to unmute? And this, folks, this is Sue. She's the one that really helped us a lot with this report. She's tuning in from Gainesville. Hi, Sue.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. And I talked about your report with our committee,
Look, you just went on mute again.
but I keep getting remuted.
Okay. You're
Okay,
good.
am I good?
Yeah.
So I talked to our committee about Sally's report, and we asked the question, well, what's happening in Alachua County as a result of the legislation? So we went to our school district and asked, and we discovered that prior to this year, we had a little over 300 vouchers in Alachua County. We have about 29,000 students. This year, we have 1,100. And the reason when they began tracking these children, the state required the districts to find out where the children were disappearing during the pandemic, because many districts lost children. They didn't know where they were going to school or if they were. Most of the 1,100 children who are now enrolled in private school were already enrolled in private school. So what's happened in Alachua County is that parents who were already paying tuition took a voucher so they didn't have to pay so much tuition. And you might check that in your county as well, because that really tells the story of profiteering at public expense.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. And you know, one other statistic that you might be interested in, I did look this up. I mentioned that they expanded recently, the governor and the commissioner of education expanded the Hope Scholarship. So if you were being bullied to wear a mask in school, and they've had 126 applications for that particular voucher. So it's not a huge number, but still, you know, that's a lot of money at $10,000 a piece.
Yeah.
Sally, Jan wants to know if we can get a copy, if she can get a copy of your PowerPoint.
I'll talk to you about that, Jan, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, this, I'll tell you what, this meeting is recorded. And so we'll have it on our website. And then it's also available on the State League website, my Lunch and
Okay.
Learn. So you can see the recording of it, but I'm kind of reluctant just to give out the PowerPoint.
Okay, that'll be fine.
Mhm. But again, you can, everything I've said here is in our full report, which is also available on the website. So you can read that as well.
Okay,
Thank you, Sally.
this is a question that I have, Sally. You mentioned, this is Felicia. You mentioned that it was I believe you indicated it wasn't possible to obtain any of their records through freedom of information. What did you mean by that?
Well, I meant that we don't have the resources to do that.
Okay.
I think, you know, a lot of times when a public records request, and this, I don't even know if you could get it because it's a private organization. But, you know, it's a lot of times you have to pay, you know, so much per page. We just don't have the kind of deep pockets or the resources. Like I say, we're just a bunch of retired educators and retired interested people who did the best we could. And I think we did pretty well, my team. And Sue, it's not Sally's report, really. It was a team effort, and we really had a lot of good, smart women looking into these things, but we could only go so far with, you know, what we have available to us as far as finances, for one thing.
I have one other question. This is Felicia again. Is it possible for as part of our Lobby Corps activities to brief legislators on the impact of these laws in terms of how these funds are actually being siphoned off of public school? I mean, is this something that we can do legitimately within the confines of our of what we're allowed to do?
Yes, we can. In fact, we did. I have sent the report to our local delegation, and we can certainly, send the report and at least a summary of it, because I'm sure they wouldn't read it. But we can certainly make them aware of what's going on with Step Up for Students, because I'm sure most of the legislators are very unaware of this as well. Because again, on the surface, it just sounds like a great idea, is let parents have choice. They know what their kids need. And the other thing is, that especially, I know we're nonpartisan, but just to be a fact is that the Republican mantra of private is better, that they really believe this, that, private is superior. And so there is this sense of helping these kids go to a private school, which means better. So, I think it's well intentioned by a lot of people, but then there are these subgroups that are gaming the system and learning how to profit off of it. And I think that's really what's happening, because I think it started out as a way to help kids. And one of the good scholarships, and the one that I have heard is valuable, is the Gardner Scholarship, and that's the one for students with special needs. And that I know personally of a couple of families that have gotten that, and it's really helped them. Like one has a severely autistic child who wasn't getting help that he needed in the public school, and has been able to go, get the help that he needs. So there are instances where they're good. And the other thing we need to be clear is that it's not like all public school, and by public, I mean a district run school. All district schools are wonderful and all private schools are terrible. No, it's not black and white. There are some really bad schools everywhere, and there's some really wonderful schools everywhere. So we need to be careful. We're not trying to point the finger at one kind or another, but what we're pointing out is a huge operation making money with little oversight, and the fact that they are able to divert what should be public money supporting our government to go to a private organization with no oversight. That's the real scandal. And we'll see, I've tried to we've sent this to several newspapers, to investigative reporters. I even sent it to 60 Minutes, Sue, and I got no response. So to me, it's really something that would be a really juicy story, but so far nobody else agrees. Joel, I think I see Joel's hand up. Excuse me. Joel, unmute.
The fact that 66% is going to religious schools is against the Constitution.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to ask about is the educational spending account. All right, so that they go to a private school and they get, say, $7,000. And if it doesn't cost that much tuition, then whatever's extra is their savings account.
Yes, that's the way I understand it. So take Sue's example of Alachua County. Okay, let's say you were going to a school that charged $15,000 tuition, and you were able to pay that. But now, since you can qualify for a voucher, you can get 10,000 of that paid by the state. Or you can, if you don't need to spend the whole 10,000 on the tuition, because you can cover, then you could use it to buy computers, to buy extra tutoring, whatever is on the qualified list. So it's very at the parents' discretion how they can spend it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, and again, this is a whole new thing. So this year, this is where the tax credit scholarships is still the ones that are funded through credits that are diverted from sales tax or corporate tax. But the new one, these educational savings account, ESAs, that's the ones that are coming from general revenue. And that's the one I hope somebody will bring a lawsuit. But that's very expensive and, you know, probably doomed to failure given the Supreme Court, but it's got to be raised. It's just not right. Richard, I see you hand up.
Thank you, Sally.
You've got feedback.
Yeah, I think
We can't hear you.
I'm going to mute Richard for a moment. What is happening is Richard and I believe Jan are probably close to each other.
Oh,
And so there's the feedback from having two
oh.
two participants in close proximity.
Well, maybe they could put it in the chat. Well, we're just about out of time. But you know, if any of you are like in Rotary or Kiwanis or anybody that's looking for a speaker, I'd be happy to do this presentation, you know, to any kind of a group. In fact, tomorrow I've been invited. I'm going to do it for this Sarasota League for their hot topics. And there's a group in Tampa that's contacted me. So help us spread the word, because this is something that few people know what's going on, but it's really damaging kids and it's certainly not fair. It's not the way to run a democracy, to be diverting money to private education with no oversight or accountability. So that's the message for tonight. And I really am so thankful that you came, and please give any comments in the chat or whatever. Keep in touch with me and let me know if you want me to do this, share it with anybody else or any other groups. We'd be happy to do that. So
Well, I think
you want
I think Richard is now. I don't hear the feedback now. Richard, if you want to go ahead, and we've got a
Okay,
couple of minutes.
It's still feed.
Yep, it's still there.
feed. Yeah, she's in the other. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm
No,
going
we
to
can
send
hear you now.
Sally an email with my question.
Well, we can hear you now. Go ahead. You're good now.
Oh, you can hear me? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
there's not feedback.
That was a very good presentation this evening. I
Thank you.
used the word good with hesitation. But I think you know what I mean by that. It was well done and good job.
Thank you.
Now, what I would like to know is, can you suggest a good reading or a journal, you know, that treats things from their side? I would like to read something that discusses what they discuss and what they argue about and so forth.
Yes, the best one is Jeb Bush's foundation, Sue, what's it called? The Foundation for Florida's Future or something like that. It's another big think tank, and they have a journal, and I'm on their email list. So they're about to have a huge big conference in Lake Buena Vista with Jeb speaking and everything. And he's, you know, anything, just Google Jeb Bush's articles, and he's always got it out there, you know, how wonderful this is. Parent choice, you know, privatizing is the way to go. So that would be my suggestion. And if you want a really good reading on the other side, you know, what I'm talking about, what's the danger of privatization, is read The Wolf at the Schoolhouse Door. I can't remember who the author is.
Great title.
The Wolf at the Schoolhouse Door. And it's a really good expose of what's going on with all this privatization. And, you know, the other thing just I'll throw out is that we didn't even talk about the charter school issue, but what's really happening in that domain too is there's profiteering big time. Again, charters started as a good thing, you know, trying to be innovative and try new things. And then the profiteers discovered they could make money off of this. And Sue, I'll let you, she's the real expert on this. Do you want to chime in? And I mean, that's a real scandal. And see, charter schools is a whole nother thing. They are technically public schools. So that's a whole other domain that's ripping us off. So Sue, you want to say a quick word about that? unmute. There you go.
I'm going to end this with a positive, hopeful comment. We've been working in NPE. I'm on this, Diane Ravich's group, Network for Public Education, has been working on the for-profit charter school issue. And we are the biggest for-profit charter school state in the nation. Over half of our charter schools are for-profit. And we've been doing in-depth analyses, much like what Sally has done today on for-profit charters, Academica, CSUSA, for example, in Florida and others. The US Congress, the House education budget has just passed banning for-profit education in the US. Now it has to get through the Senate, which will be a little tricky, right?
Yeah.
But 2 years ago, this would never have happened. And the fact that they have banned the use of federal funds for for-profit charters means all the Title I money and all of the federal funding cannot go to charters if this actually were to pass the entire legislative body. So what it says to me is keep at it. We're gaining awareness, and the kind of report that Sally has done was what we did on charters, and it makes a difference. So I just thank Sally for this. I think we just, instead of having step up, we put one foot in front of the other and get them out of the way.
Well, thank you, Sue. But again, it was a team effort. It wasn't my report, but I do appreciate the comments. And again, thank you for attending tonight. And Felicia, I'll let you wrap it up.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sally. That's an excellent presentation. And quite frankly, we've got a lot of educating of the legislators to do in the next section. I want to thank each of you for participating. We hope to see you next month, October the 21st, if you can make it. And everyone have a blessed evening. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.